Hi guys, I hope you're all doing really well. I am so excited to finally be able to talk about the brand new Scream movie. If you guys saw my most anticipated horror movies of 2022, then you will know that this was the one I was most excited for. But to be honest with you, this is the movie I was most excited for overall. I have been a fan of the Scream movies and franchise for a long time. Scream, along with Psycho, is my favourite horror movie of all time. The franchise is my favourite horror franchise of all time, and Sidney Prescott is, in my opinion, the greatest final girl of all time. So I know that a few of us were quite nervous about this instalment, as it would be the first one that wouldn't be directed by Wes Craven after his passing in 2015, and it's also the second instalment that's not written by Kevin Williamson, the first one being Scream 3. But the reins were handed over to Radio Silence, who gave us Ready or Not, and personally when I heard this I was really excited. I really enjoyed Ready or Not and I couldn't wait to see what they would do with this instalment. Radio Silence are huge fans of both the original Scream and Wes Craven, and actually credit these both with being the inspiration behind them becoming directors and producers. They're also the reason why Neve Campbell agreed to sign on to do Scream 5. Originally she was very apprehensive about agreeing. She wasn't really comfortable with the idea of it being made by somebody other than Wes Craven, and Radio Silence felt that they just couldn't make the movie without her, which I would agree. And they wrote Neve Campbell a letter explaining their love of and respect for both the original movie and for Wes Craven, and citing it as the reason they do what they do today. And this apparently meant a great deal to Neve Campbell, who had a lot of love for Wes Craven, and she thankfully agreed to sign on to it. Just a heads up that spoilers are included in this episode. I did debate whether to have a spoiler-free section and a spoiler section, but to be honest with you, I just wanted to be able to freely gush about this movie. But yes, this is a spoiler review, so just a heads up for you guys if you haven't seen the film yet. Okay, so starting off with the positives, there are so many nods to the original movie in this film, but they are done so well and placed into the movie in such a natural way that while some of them are really quite obvious, some of them are so subtle that you might actually miss them on your first watch of the film. There are things like the setting of the party at Stu's house at the end of the movie, but then there's also another scene where one of the characters, Amber, goes down into the basement to get more beers, and the set is actually dressed just like the scene where Tatum goes for beers in the original Scream. And then you have things like the character Tara in the opening of the movie. While she's on the phone to the killer, she's fidgeting around with the knives in the knife block, just like Casey Becker did in the opening of the original Scream. So a huge positive for me with this film is that some of the scenes are so visually striking. The use of shadow and light and the colour palette of whites and blacks and blues. Some of these scenes seem to be modelled around or just made completely to complement Ghostface's outfit. It's actually the same style of the movie posters, and to me they're just so aesthetically pleasing. The hospital attack scene is my favourite scene visually for this reason alone. You have the power going out, so all the lights die apart from these tiny little underlights on the nurse's desk and on the handrails along the corridor, and the colour palette and the light and the shadow just, again, they perfectly complement Ghostface, and it's just such a visually beautiful scene. The scares in Scream 5 are constructed and set up so well. They build tension through stretching out the scenes and playing around with your expectations. They also use a lot of false scares throughout the film, especially in the scene where Judy Hicks and her son Wes are attacked. In my opinion, this scene was an absolute masterpiece. The sound design is so good. It is the perfect scene to watch in a cinema or with surround sound. And they used the false scares one after the other, almost to the point of exhaustion, if I'm honest. But then, because they pushed it so far, it lured me into a false sense of security, and then boom, they hit me with the actual scare in the scene, and it was very effective. But I can see how so many false scares one after the other could be quite irritating to some audience members. To be honest with you, Radio Silence did an incredible job with the film overall, and I think that this fits in almost seamlessly with the rest of the films in the franchise through tone and look and quality. And I read that a lot of people are saying that they think that Wes Craven would be really proud of this movie, and I have to agree. And I think that a lot of this can be credited to Radio Silence's love of the movie. I watched an interview with them the other day after seeing the film, where they say that they themselves even questioned their right and ability to make Scream 5. but in my opinion, they absolutely nailed it. I also think that the film's pacing is really good, and considering that this is a 2-hour long movie, which is probably a lot longer than it needs to be, at no point when watching this film did I feel like it was dragging. I think that Scream 5 is probably the most emotional installment in the franchise, but then I guess that could be expected with so many years of history and so many years of getting to know these characters. But a lot of the emotion was seated in the scenes between the original trio. There were some very moving moments between Dewey and Gale and Sidney. In fact, I just love Gale and Sidney's relationship. Their whole relationship journey and relationship arc through the franchise is one of my favourite aspects. And in Scream 5, we just find them in a point in their lives where there is nothing but love and care and support and respect for each other. So I thought that David Arquette gave an incredibly strong performance in this film. We find Dewey in a different stage in his life and a different version of him that we've never seen before. And I think that looking through the films, no two Deweys are ever exactly the same, but this was a really interesting place to find him. He's older, he's wiser, and he's just more tired with life. But David Arquette is clearly giving his all in this performance. So Scream 5 is still very much meta and self-aware, referencing horror movie rules, the in-universe stab movies, the original Scream, and where horror is at today with requels like Halloween and elevated horror like Hereditary. Scream 5 is in itself a requel where you have two people wanting to recreate the original Woodsboro murders so that Hollywood can then make a requel of the original stab movie. And I love how the film's title is in itself very meta. Instead of Scream 5, it's just Scream, the same as the original movie. I think Scream 5 reboots enough to appeal to a new generation of audiences, but is also pleasing enough for long-time fans by linking back to the past, bringing back those legacy characters, and taking everything back to the beginning. Okay, so I have a couple of mixed aspects that I want to talk about, and one of those is that I feel like some of the kills are a little overkill. I mean, there's nothing out of the ordinary, there's nothing too gruesome or too disturbing, and Scream has never been known for its outlandish or gory kills, but there are just some where there's a lot more aggression, and the special effects and the sound design makes it feel a lot more gory. I think the one that really springs to mind for me is at the end of the movie where Sam, Billy's daughter, is attacking one of the killers, and she must stab them about 17 to 20 times. None of these are actually effective, dispose of your killer moves. It's just over the top aggression, and I felt like that went on for a little bit too long. And in all honesty, I personally would have liked more screen time with the original trio. Now, it's wonderful to have them back, and it is great to check in with these characters after another 10-year gap and see how they're doing. And they were well written and they were well acted. There is nothing wrong with the appearance of the trio in the movie. It's just that I would have liked more screen time with them. Another mixed aspect for me was the killer reveal. One of them, the boyfriend, Richie, I had figured out quite early on in the film that he was going to be one of the killers. There was just certain things that he did and said that made him stand out to me. The other one, Amber, I didn't expect it to be her, but I was just disappointed because I was never really that interested in her character. So some of my disappointment was actually self-inflicted. It was the moment where Amber had been revealed but Richie hadn't yet. And I began to doubt myself and question my sureness about him being the killer. And I convinced myself for a moment that the other killer might actually be Stu Macher, one of the original killers. And when it was revealed that the other one wasn't Stu, it was Richie, I just thought, oh, okay, so this is who we're going with then. Okay. So yeah, some of the disappointment, self-inflicted. I have no sympathy for myself because if I'm going to convince myself that one of the killers is Stu, none of the reveals would ever have lived up to that reveal. I like that the reveal was back in Stu's house, back in Stu's kitchen, but I just felt like the reveal didn't pack enough of a punch in my opinion. I didn't completely hate their motive either. I think the idea of a crazed fan is an interesting way to go. We've probably all experienced this in our fandoms, especially in the horror community. Fans can sometimes take it too far and can become entitled and feel that they own the characters and own the movies and are owed something by the creators. There can be a lot of unhealthy aggression within fandoms, but the movie doesn't dump over fans as a whole. the same conversation, the same dialogue is delivered by two different characters in different stages of this film. Once by Mindy Meeks and once by Richie, basically saying the same thing of how important the original Stab movie was to fans and how much fans really love that film. One, by Mindy, is a healthy observation. One, by Richie, is an unhealthy obsession that is used as a motive to kill people. Okay, and finally, for my mixed aspects of this film, I have to talk about the death of Dewey. Now, the reason why it's in this section is because I genuinely have mixed feelings about it. I think that it is incredible that they've actually had the guts to kill off one of the original trio, and there's something quite poetic about it being Dewey, seeing as how he was the one who kept being killed off, but not really, in the first two in the franchise. I also think that his death scene was one of the most visually beautiful in the movie and has the scariest ghost face outside of the original film as well. But once we know who the killers are, I just felt annoyed that it was Amber who finally got to finish off Dewey. I mean, he survived Billy and Stu and Mickey and even Roman. To be finished off by Amber, it just didn't feel right to me. And also, Amber is so small. There is no way that she is the same tall looming spectre of that death scene. So, unfortunately, R.I.P. Dewey Riley, and in the words of Ghostface, it's been an honour. Okay, and now on to the negative aspects of the film. There aren't many, but this is by no means a perfect movie. So first up, I feel as though the whole being aware that the killers always come back for one last scare has been done. It was done to perfection in the first one, and it was done very cleverly in the second one, where it tricked you into thinking which of the killers would come back for a scare. But by the fifth film, it's no longer surprising and it's no longer scary, in my opinion. And as much as I was happy that Scream maintained its self-awareness and its meta-commentary, I just feel like there were certain parts of the film where it went a little bit too far with it. When Scream originally came out in '96, there weren't many horror films that were meta, and it felt very new and very refreshing. But these days it's much more commonplace, and we have a lot of meta movies like Cabin in the Woods, and the audiences today almost expect it. So I feel like when Scream 5 was being meta, it was just a little bit too on the nose and went just a little bit too far. I also think that there were a couple of stupid character decisions in the film. There were times when characters could finish off the killers and didn't, where they could find out who the killers were and didn't. But I suppose that's, hand in hand with horror movies. And my final negative for this film is that I enjoyed the first 2/3 of the movie much, much more than I enjoyed the last third. I absolutely adored seeing Billy's cameos and seeing Martha Meeks again and their shrine to Randy in the house. And I did really love seeing Stu's house again. It is my favourite horror house of all time. I just thought it was unfortunate that it was the setting for the weakest part of the movie. So there you have it, guys, my review of Scream 5, or also known as Scream. I absolutely loved this film, and I cannot express how incredible it was to finally see Scream and see Ghostface up on the big screen. I gave it 4.5 stars out of 5 because I'm biased, but also because I think this is a really good film, and I think it is a genuinely good and respectful installment in the franchise. I didn't give it 5 stars, only because there were a few issues that I had with it, as you heard in the negatives. A couple of random notes from my notebook that I scribbled down in the cinema that didn't quite make it into the review were Galen Dewey, oh man the feels. Dude, it's dead meat. Dewey's off to the hospital, I have a bad feeling about this, and Sidney Prescott does not get taken out by some nobody. I would love to know your guys' thoughts on Scream 5, so do let me know. I am going to be doing another episode where I talk about the Scream franchise as a whole, do a little mini review for each film, and then rank them all. And I'm also going to do another episode where I'm ranking all of the Ghostface killers, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on those. But in the meantime, thank you as always for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye, guys.